Story 1, The Diner at the Edge of Nowhere. The rain came down in sheets, a relentless cascade that turned the lonely stretch of Highway 12 into a shimmering black mirror under the sodium glow of flickering streetlights. The Evergreen Diner, a squat, neon-lit relic of the 1950s, sat like a forgotten sentinel on the outskirts of a sleepy Washington town, its red and white checkered floor scuffed by decades of boots and dreams. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee, greasy hash browns, and the faint tang of nostalgia. It was 1:45 a.m., and I, Kathy Monroe, was wiping down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that night, my reflection staring back at me from the polished chrome of the coffee machine. I was 29, a transplant from the humid embrace of Alabama, where folks wore their hearts on their sleeves and small talk was an art form. Up here in the Pacific Northwest, the people were different, kind but guarded, their words as sparse as the pines that loom beyond the diner's windows. I'd been working the closing shift at the Evergreen for nearly a year, a job that paid just enough to keep my one-bedroom apartment and my beat-up Honda Civic running. The diner closed at 2 a.m., a fact that felt absurd in a town where the population barely broke 4 digits. But the highway brought stragglers, truckers, drifters, and the occasional lost soul looking for a warm meal and a moment's respite. That night, the diner was nearly empty, save for the hum of the jukebox playing a mournful Patsy Cline tune and the clatter of dishes from the kitchen, where Eddie, the grizzled chef, was scrubbing the grill with a vengeance. I was counting the minutes until I could lock up and crawl into bed when the bell above the door jingled, sharp and intrusive against the quiet. In walked a man, heavy-set and awkward, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. He wore jeans hiked up too high, a gray shirt tucked in with military precision, and a brown jacket that looked like it had seen better days. His mustache was thick and unkempt, and behind his wire-rimmed glasses, his eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity. "Evening," I said, forcing a smile as I grabbed a menu. "Bar or table?" "Table," he replied, his voice low and gravelly, a smile tugging at his lips that didn't quite reach his eyes. I led him to a booth by the window, the vinyl seats creaking as he settled in. "Kitchen closes in 10, I warned, handing him the menu. He nodded, scanning it briefly before ordering a black coffee and French toast. Simple enough, I thought, though Eddie shot me a look that could have curdled milk when I relayed the order. As I poured his coffee, he spoke again, his voice cutting through the silence. "Name's Nolan. You from around here?" His tone was casual, but there was a weight to it, like he was testing the waters. I hesitated, my southern instincts warring with the caution I'd learned up north. "Not originally," I said, keeping it vague. "Moved up a few years back." He nodded, his smile widening, and I felt a prickle of unease. Most folks around here didn't ask questions. They ate, paid, and left. But Nolan was chatty, complaining about potholes and the weather, his words tumbling out like he was trying to fill the silence. I humored him, mentioning the harsh winters that tore up the roads. But when he pressed for specifics about where I lived, I deflected. "Oh, you know, just around," I said, busying myself with wiping the counter. His eyes followed me, sharp and unblinking, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was studying me, cataloging every word, every movement. By the time Eddie slid the French toast onto the counter, I was ready to retreat to the safety of the kitchen, but Nolan waved me over, his smile now a permanent fixture. "You ever get lonely out here?" he asked, his fork hovering over his plate. The question caught me off guard, and I laughed, brushing it off with a joke about the diner being my social hub. But his gaze lingered, and I felt the air shift, like the moment before a storm breaks. I excused myself, retreating behind the counter, my social battery drained. When he finally finished, I dropped the check on his table with a pointed smile, a silent nudge that it was time to go. He paid with a card, left a modest tip, and shuffled out into the night. Eddie was staying to lock up, so I grabbed my purse, said my goodbyes, and stepped into the parking lot. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and pine. My Honda sat under the lone streetlight, flanked by Eddie's pickup and a third car, a silver sedan, older, maybe a Toyota or an Audi, its windows dark and impenetrable. I frowned, glancing around. Nolan was gone, but the car felt out of place, like it was watching me. Shaking off the thought, I climbed into my car and started the 20-minute drive home. The highway was deserted, the only sound the hum of my tires and the occasional crackle of the radio. I was halfway home when a sharp ding shattered the quiet, and my dashboard lit up with a warning. Low tire pressure, rear passenger side. My heart sank. I didn't know how to change a tire, had never even called roadside assistance. The numbers on the screen dropped fast, 20 psi, then 15, then 10, and the steering wheel began to shudder, the car lurching as the tire gave out. I cursed under my breath, pulling onto the narrow shoulder, the darkness pressing in around me. I stepped out, the cold biting through my jacket, and crouched to inspect the tire. It was flat, the rubber sagging pathetically against the rim. Before I could process what to do, a pair of headlights sliced through the night, growing brighter as a car slowed to a stop behind me. My pulse quickened, and I scrambled back into my car, locking the doors. A shadow moved outside, and then a light tap on my window made me jump. I looked up, and there he was, Nolan, his face illuminated by the glow of his phone, that same unsettling smile plastered across it. "Kathy, is that you?" he called through the glass, his voice muffled but cheerful. "You okay?" He laughed as if this were the funniest coincidence in the world. My stomach twisted. I wasn't a fool. I knew this wasn't chance. The diner, the questions, the car in the lot, it all clicked into place. He'd done this. He'd slashed my tire, followed me, waited for this moment. I cracked the window barely an inch, just enough to speak. "Flat tire," I said, my voice tight. He nodded, peering at the car. "Which one?" he asked, playing dumb. "Back passenger side," I replied, my hand already on my phone, dialing 911. He strolled around to inspect the tire, and I let the call connect, the operator's voice faint but steady. Nolan returned, his smile wider now. "I can fix that for you," he said, leaning closer. "Just step out, and I'll have it done in no time." "I'm waiting for my boyfriend," I lied, my thumb hovering over the speaker button. The operator was listening, and I needed her to understand. "He's on his way to her." Story 2. The Shadow at the Park. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and cotton candy, as I stood at my post in the heart of Lakeside Amusement Park, a sprawling wonderland of rickety roller coasters and flashing lights nestled in the rolling hills of upstate New York. It was October 2024, one of the last weekends before the park shuttered for the winter, and the crowds were thinner, the energy subdued. I was 15, a lanky kid named Ben Harper, working my first job as a ride operator to save up for a used car. The park was my escape, a place where the world felt alive, even if my days were filled with repetitive safety checks and the endless chatter of overexcited kids. That Sunday started like any other. I clocked in at 10 a.m., my navy blue Lakeside polo stiff with starch, and spent the day herding families onto the tilt-a-whirl, my voice hoarse from shouting instructions over the blare of pop music. By 4:55 p.m., with my shift nearing its end, I was bone-tired, my sneakers scuffed and my patience frayed. I was packing up my water bottle and hoodie when a man approached, his presence jarring against the fading daylight. He was disheveled, his scraggly beard flecked with gray, his hair a tangled mess that looked like it hadn't seen a comb in weeks. His gray t-shirt was stained with what I hoped was ketchup, and his black sweatpants were riddled with holes exposing pale, bony knees. His eyes darted nervously, scanning the crowd as if expecting someone to leap out from behind the popcorn stand. I forced a smile, my customer service instincts kicking in. "Can I help you, sir?" He didn't answer right away, just stared, his gaze heavy and unnerving. I shifted my weight, glancing at my watch. 4 minutes until I could punch out. He turned his head, looking over his shoulder, then back at me, his silence stretching into something almost tangible. "Sir?" I prompted, a little sharper this time. "Can I help you?" His voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper, rough and halting. Where are the bathrooms?" I pointed up the hill, forcing cheer into my tone. "Right up there, to the right. Can't miss 'em." He nodded, shuffling off, but not before throwing another glance my way, his eyes lingering too long. I avoided his gaze, busying myself with straightening a stack of safety flyers, but I could feel him watching, a prickle of unease crawling up my spine. My replacement, a college kid named Mike, arrived just as the man disappeared into the crowd. I grabbed my stuff and bolted, weaving through the park's maze of rides and food stalls to the employee locker room. I changed out of my uniform, trading the polo for a hoodie and jeans, and headed to the employee parking lot, where I sat on a splintered bench to wait for Jordan, my 17-year-old co-worker and rideshare buddy. The lot was quiet, the only sound the distant scream of riders on the Screamin' Eagle and the rustle of leaves skittering across the pavement. Jordan's beat-up Ford Focus pulled up 20 minutes later, the bass of his music thumping through the windows. I climbed in, grateful for the warmth, and we headed to Mickey's Diner, a greasy spoon just outside town, where the burgers were cheap and the fries were endless. We slid into a vinyl booth, the air thick with the smell of frying onions, and ordered our usual double cheeseburgers with extra pickles. I was halfway through my first bite when I froze, my eyes locking onto a figure 3 tables down. It was him, the man from the park. Same stained shirt, same wild hair, same nervous energy. He sat alone, a cup of coffee untouched in front of him, his eyes fixed on me. My stomach lurched, the burger turning to ash in my mouth. "Jordan," I whispered, nudging him under the table. "That guy, he was at the park, asked me about the bathrooms. Now he's here staring." Jordan glanced over, his brow furrowing. "Probably just a coincidence, Ben. Don't sweat it." But his voice lacked conviction, and I could tell he was uneasy. We ate faster, the easy banter of earlier replaced by tense silence. When we paid and left, I kept my head down, avoiding the man's gaze, but I could feel it boring into me, heavy as a physical touch. The drive home was 35 minutes, a winding route through dark, tree-lined roads. At the first red light, I glanced out the window and felt my heart stutter. There, in the lane beside us, was a white Honda Civic, its driver unmistakable. The man from the park, the diner, now here, his head turned toward me, his eyes glinting under the streetlights. "Jordan," I said, my voice tight. "It's him. He's following us." Jordan's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "You sure?" I nodded, my pulse hammering. The light turned green, and Jordan gunned it, weaving through traffic. The Honda stayed close, its headlights a constant presence in the rearview mirror. We took random turns, doubling back through quiet neighborhoods, but the car kept pace, never too close, never too far. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we lost him, the Honda vanishing into the night. We circled our block 3 times to be sure, the streetlights casting long shadows across the lawns. Jordan dropped me off at my house, a modest split level where I lived with my mom, sister, and occasionally my dad, who was away on a business trip. Mom and my sister were at the mall, leaving the house dark and empty. I locked the door behind me, the silence oppressive, and headed to my room, collapsing onto my bed. I was drifting off when a sound jolted me upright, a faint tap at my window. My heart leapt into my throat. I crept to the blinds, peering through the slats, and froze. There on my front lawn stood the man, his silhouette stark against the moonlight. He was smiling, a wide, predatory grin that sent ice through my veins. I stumbled back, grabbing my phone and dialing 911, my voice shaking as I whispered my address to the operator. The police arrived 15 minutes later, their flashlights sweeping the yard, but the man was gone, vanished like a ghost. They took my statement, their faces skeptical but kind, and promised to patrol the area. I didn't sleep that night, every creak of the house a threat, every shadow a figure waiting to strike. The next day I quit my job at Lakeside, the park's magic tainted by fear. I haven't seen the man since, but sometimes in the quiet of the night, I swear I hear that tap at my window, and I wonder if he's still out there, watching. Story 3, The Rain and the Stranger. The rain fell in a torrent, a biblical deluge that turned the streets of my small coastal town into rivers of mud and misery. It was a Tuesday night in November, and I, Elizabeth Beth Carter, was working the late shift at the Starlight Diner, a 24-hour joint where the coffee was strong and the clientele was a mix of locals, truckers, and the occasional wanderer blown in by the storm. The diner was a beacon on Main Street, its neon sign buzzing faintly, casting a pinkish glow across the wet pavement. Inside it was warm, the air thick with the scent of bacon and the low hum of a classic rock station. I'd been at the Starlight for a year, my knack for conversation making me a favorite among the regulars. At 27, I was single, living alone in a second-floor apartment in a converted Victorian house a 10-minute drive from the diner. I loved the job, the rhythm of it, the clink of plates, the banter with customers, the quiet moments when I could sip coffee and daydream. But rainy nights like this were slow, the kind of nights where the clock seemed to mock you, each tick louder than the last. By 11:30 p.m., the diner was nearly empty, the only sounds the sizzle of the grill and the occasional rumble of thunder. I was refilling ketchup bottles when the bell above the door chimed, and in walked a man and a woman, their coats dripping onto the linoleum. The man was in his early 40s, tall and broad, with a square jaw and eyes that seemed to see too much. His companion was younger, maybe 22, her blonde hair damp and plastered to her face, her expression distant, almost vacant. They looked out of place like actors who'd wandered off a movie set. "Evening," I said, grabbing menus. "Table for two?" The man nodded, his smile tight, and I led them to a booth near the back. They took their time ordering, their heads bent close, their voices hushed. I caught fragments of their conversation, something about a car, a missed turn, but it was too soft to make out. When they finally ordered, a burger for him, a salad for her, the man leaned back, his gaze settling on me. "Long night?" he asked, his voice smooth, like he was used to being heard. I grinned, leaning into my role as the chatty waitress. "Always is on nights like this. You folks passing through?" He said they were, heading north, though he was vague about their destination. The woman stayed silent, picking at her napkin, her eyes fixed on the table. I kept the conversation light, joking about the weather, the town's lack of excitement, anything to fill the silence. But then he asked, casual as anything, "You live alone?" The question hung in the air, innocent enough on the surface but sharp in its specificity. I hesitated, my smile faltering. "Yeah, just me and my cat," I said, keeping it vague. "About 10 minutes up the road. Quiet, you know." He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine, and I felt a chill, though I brushed it off. He was with a woman after all. Surely he wasn't a threat. I laughed, making a joke about being stuck in this town forever, and moved to check on another table. They lingered for nearly an hour, their food barely touched, before paying and leaving. I watched them go, the woman trailing behind the man like a shadow. By midnight, the diner was closing, and I said goodbye to my co-workers, pulling my hood up against the rain as I dashed to my car. The drive home was slow, the wipers struggling against the downpour, the road a blur of wet asphalt and reflected headlights. My apartment was on the second floor of a 3-unit house, a cozy space with creaky floors and a view of the bay on clear days. I parked, noting absently that neither of my neighbors' cars was in the lot, and ran to the front door, fumbling with my keys. Inside, I dropped my purse on the counter, the silence of the house wrapping around me like a blanket. I was peeling off my wet jacket when a pounding at the door stopped me cold. It was nearly 1 a.m., the sound frantic, almost desperate. I crept to the door, peering through the peephole. A girl stood on the other side of the glass storm door, drenched, her gray hoodie obscuring her face. She was alone, her fists hammering the glass, her voice muffled but urgent. "Please let me in. I need to use your phone." I hesitated, my hand on the lock. "Are you okay?" I called. "Are you lost?" She pressed closer, her breath fogging the glass. "There's a man. He's following me. Please, I need help." Her voice cracked, and I felt a pang of sympathy. But something about her was familiar, a nagging sense of déjà vu. I asked who the man was, where he was, and she turned, scanning the street. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "Please open the door." She tried the handle, and that's when it hit me. She was the girl from the diner, the silent one with the vacant stare. "Weren't you at the Starlight earlier?" I asked, my voice sharp. She didn't answer, just pounded harder, her eyes wide with panic. "He's coming!" she cried, pointing toward the street. I followed her gaze and saw him, a tall figure in a dark coat, walking slowly toward the house, his steps deliberate, unhurried. My heart raced. It was the man from the diner, his face half lit by the streetlight, his expression unreadable. The girl's panic seemed genuine, but something was off, a choreography to their movements that felt staged. I locked eyes with her, and in that moment I knew. This was a setup, a trap. She saw the realization in my face, her expression shifting from fear to something else. Guilt, maybe, or resignation. She turned to the man and screamed, "Go!" He broke into a run, charging the door. I slammed the inner door shut, twisting the deadbolt, my hands shaking. The house was silent, no knocks, no shouts, but I wasn't foolish enough to check. I ran to the stairway connecting the apartments, banging on the upstairs tenant's door, then the downstairs one. No answer. I glanced out the window, no cars in the lot. I was alone. Back in my apartment, I locked the stairway door, my mind racing. The man's question, "Do you live alone?" echoed in my head, its menace clear now. They targeted me, planned this, and I'd walked right into it. I sank onto the couch, the rain's relentless drumming the only sound, and tried to calm my nerves. I considered calling the police, but hesitated. What could I prove? A knock, a vague threat. It felt like overreacting. I was brushing my teeth, the routine grounding me, when a new sound stopped me cold. A slow, deliberate knock from the stairway door. I froze, toothpaste dripping onto my chin. I crept to the door, my voice trembling. "Who is it?" No answer, just another knock, heavier this time. I called out my neighbors' names, nothing. "If you don't identify yourself, I'm calling the police," I shouted. A voice answered, low and guttural, chilling in its clarity. "I want your blood on me." The words sank into me like poison, and I ran to my bedroom, locking the door and diving into my closet. I dialed 911, whispering my address, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the operator. The storm outside raged, thunder shaking the house, every creak a threat. I stayed hidden, clutching my phone, until the police arrived, their flashlights cutting through the dark. They found no one, but they took my statement, checked the property, and suggested I stay elsewhere. I packed a bag and drove to my parents' house, the rain still falling, my nerves frayed. The next day, I returned to find a message scrawled in marker on the stairway door. "Thanks for the service, Beth." My blood ran cold. I stayed with my parents for weeks, jumping at every shadow before moving to a new apartment. The police never found them, and I'm left with the haunting certainty that they're still out there, waiting for another rainy night.